Phoenix in September is just brutal. It's not even just hot, it's that heavy heat, like a wet blanket draped over everything. I spent the whole afternoon in my second grade classroom, and the AC had been rattling since 8 in the morning, barely keeping it below 80 degrees. By the time the final bell rang, my throat was shot and my flats felt like they were melting into the floor. I spent 20 minutes scrubbing dried paint off a desk and kept wondering if I actually turned in those EEP reports for the district office. I think I did. Or maybe I left them by the copier. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. The drive home was the usual mess on the 101, just a sea of silver subs, and that heat haze reflecting off the asphalt. I stopped at Target to get that specific organic almond milk David liked, the kind that costs $4 more than the store brand, but tastes exactly the same. While I was in the aisle, I saw Brenda from my HOA meetings. She's the one who spends half her life complaining about how high people's grass is. She looked right through me, like I was just part of the shelving, and kept talking to her daughter about some dance recital. I didn't even bother waving. It was easier to just stay out of the way. Our house is one of those sun-bleached stucco places where every lawn is the exact same shade of green because of the landscaping crews that show up at 7 a.m. sharp. Inside, everything is neutral. Beige cream sandstone. David picked the colors. He says it creates a sense of calm, but to me, it just feels like the house is trying to blend into the desert and disappear. When I walked in, it was quiet. David was in his office, probably on another Zoom call with his regional directors. I put the milk in the fridge and started the dishwasher. I noticed a smudge of something, maybe jam on the counter, so I wiped it away. Around 6:30, David came out. He didn't really look at me, he just went straight for the espresso machine. He was wearing one of those navy polos and those khakis that always look freshly pressed, even though he'd been sitting in a chair for 8 hours. "Did the mail come?" he asked. His voice was just flat. "Yes, it's on the table," I said. "How was your meeting?" Fine, long. I have to be in Scottsdale tomorrow for a site visit, so I'll be late." He finally looked at me, but his eyes didn't really land on my face. They were more like somewhere around my shoulder, maybe checking for a stain, or just making sure I was still there. He didn't ask about the second graders or the paint, or the fact that I'd had a migraine since lunch. He just took his coffee and went back to his office. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the mail. A flyer for a lawn service, a credit card statement, and a notice from the HOA about a trash bin 3 houses down. I started thinking about our 401k and how we'd spent 20 years planning for a retirement that felt like a blurry photograph. We did everything right. The house, the savings, the reputation. I spent my 30s and 40s just making sure the gears of our life turned without making any noise. I guess I was just the oil in the machine. I decided to clean out the hall closet. It had become a graveyard for stuff we didn't know how to throw away: old holiday decorations, a broken vacuum piece, and a box of David's college textbooks. I was looking for spare light bulbs because the hallway light had flickered out the night before. While I was digging, I realized the shelf was cluttered with a bunch of old charging cables for phones we don't even own anymore. Which, by the way, is infuriating, because David insists on keeping every single one of them just in case, even the ones for a Motorola Razr from 2005. I spent like 5 minutes just untangling this knot of white plastic cords, and I felt this sudden sharp spike of irritation that this was the most emotional part of my day. I finally just shoved them into a shoebox and pushed it to the back. I think it was a Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday. Maya had soccer practice, and I had to coordinate the carpool with Sarah, who is always 10 minutes late no matter what time they agree on. I remember the smell of the grass and the sound of 28-year-olds screaming. I stood on the sidelines talking to the other moms about the new Starbucks on the corner. They talked about their kids, their husbands' promotions, and trips to Cabo. I nodded and smiled in all the right places. I felt like a piece of furniture in the conversations, something they just walked around. When we got home, Maya went straight to her room for math. David was already in bed, claiming he had a killer headache from too much screen time. I went into the guest bedroom to put away some laundry. That room is mostly just storage and for when David's sister visits. In the corner, there's this heavy mahogany dresser David insisted on buying when we first moved in. It's way too big for the room, so it makes the whole space feel cramped. As I was folding some guest towels, I noticed the bottom drawer wasn't closed all the way. There was a gap, maybe an inch. I reached down to push it shut, but my hand caught on something. I pulled the drawer open. At the very back, tucked under some old winter sweaters that David never wears because it never gets cold enough in Phoenix, was a small black leather briefcase. It wasn't one of his work bags. This one was smaller, more discreet, and had a combination lock on the side. I just stared at it for a second. I thought maybe it was old documents from his father's estate or something he'd forgotten. But David is a man of extreme order. He doesn't forget things in drawers. He categorizes. He archives. He labels. This briefcase was hidden, not stored. I felt this strange cold sensation in my chest, which was weird considering the heat. I wasn't panicked, it was more like a sudden clarity. I remembered that David had been working late 3 nights a week for the last 6 months. He'd mentioned a new project in Tempe, something about urban development that required evening site visits. I believed him because, well, that's what you do. You just believe the story because the alternative is too loud to deal with. I tried the combination. It was a shot in the dark, but I tried our wedding anniversary. Nothing. I tried Maya's birthday. Nothing. Then, I tried the date we closed on the house date David always brags about because he got a steal on the property. The lock clicked. I didn't open it right away. I just sat there on the edge of the guest bed, smelling mothballs and stale linen. I looked around the room, the beige walls, the neutral curtains, the silence of a house where everything is exactly where it should be. I realized I hadn't felt a real emotion in months that wasn't related to a lesson plan or a grocery list. I reached out and flipped the latch. Inside was a burner phone, a stack of printed photos, and a thick envelope of cash. I picked up the first photo. It wasn't a business partner. It was a woman, younger than me, laughing on a beach that definitely wasn't in Arizona. She was wearing a red swimsuit, and David's arm was wrapped tightly around her waist, his face pressed against her neck in a way he hadn't looked at me in a decade. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just put the photo back in the briefcase and closed the lid. I pushed the drawer shut and walked out of the room, leaving the light on. I didn't sleep much that night. I just laid there watching the ceiling fan spin, and it had this annoying clicking sound, like it was counting down to something. My sheets felt damp and sticky against my skin, which is just great when you're already spiraling. I think I spent 20 minutes just trying to find a cool spot on the pillow, but the whole bed felt like a heating pad. Every time I closed my eyes, I just kept seeing that woman in the red swimsuit. I started wondering where the photo was even taken. It looked tropical, maybe Mexico. David told me he went to some corporate retreat in Cancun a few years back, but he spent the whole time complaining about the humidity and the food. I remember thinking back then that it was actually kind of sweet he didn't like it because it meant he wanted to come home. I felt like an idiot thinking that. The next morning was already like 90 degrees by 7 point. I made coffee and put his mug on the counter. I stood there for a while watching the steam. I think it was a Thursday. No, wait, it was Friday. I remember I had a whole stack of spelling tests I had to grade before the weekend. The coffee maker was leaking again, leaving that gross brown ring on the granite that never seems to fully come off, no matter how hard I scrub it. It's such a small thing, but it was driving me crazy right then. The house just felt off. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. David walked in wearing a gray suit. He looked totally put together, just completely oblivious. He kissed my cheek, but it was just a habit, you know? Like something he did without thinking. Morning, he said, grabbing his coffee. I've got a tight schedule today, back-to-back calls until noon. I didn't really move. I just looked at him. I found the briefcase, David. He stopped with the mug halfway to his mouth. He just froze for a second. It didn't even look like fear. It was more like he was trying to figure out what to say. Then he just chuckled. It was that kind of soft, condescending laugh that just makes you feel small. The briefcase? What are you talking about? The black leather one, in the guest room, bottom drawer. He set the coffee down slowly. He wasn't angry, which was weirder. He actually looked concerned. He stepped toward me and used that voice, that soft, therapist voice he uses when he's trying to handle me. Emma, honey, are you okay? You've been so stressed with the new school year. I know the district has been on your back about those reports. I just stared at him. I saw the photos, David. I saw the woman, he sighed. A long, tired sigh, like I was a kid telling him the moon was made of cheese. He didn't even deny it right away. He just shook his head and leaned against the counter. I can't believe you were going through my things. That's really disappointing, Emma. I thought we had trust in this house. It happened so fast. Suddenly, I wasn't the one who had been cheated on. I was the one doing something wrong. Trust, I whispered. You have a burner phone and a stash of cash in the guest room. You're having an affair. It's not what you think, he said. His voice was totally level. It was a long time ago. A lapse in judgment when things were hard between us. I kept those things to remind myself how close I came to throwing everything away. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. I was protecting the family for a second. I almost believed him. That's just how I am. But then I thought about the photo. The way he was holding her. That didn't look like some old mistake from years ago. The picture was too clear for an old camera. Protecting the family, I said. Is that why there's $5,000 in an envelope? David's face changed. The nice voice was gone, and he just sounded cold. You're spiraling. Emma, I think you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe it's burnout. You should probably talk to your doctor about your anxiety. You're seeing things and twisting them. He didn't apologize. He didn't even ask for forgiveness. He just told me I was mentally unstable. He said it so convincingly that for a second, I actually wondered if I'd imagined the red swimsuit. That's just how he does it. He doesn't argue, he just makes you feel like you can't trust your own brain. I'm not crazy, I said, but I sounded small. I think you are, he replied. He took a sip of his coffee. I have to go. We'll talk when you've calmed down and can be rational. Just try to have a normal day for Maya's sake. He walked out, and I heard the garage door rumble shut. I didn't cry. I just felt this weird vibration in my fingers. I spent the next few hours at school, but I was basically a zombie. A student, Leo, asked me why I was just staring at the whiteboard, without writing anything. I just told him I was thinking. I think I forgot to give the class their vocabulary lists for the week, but I honestly didn't care. When I got home, I didn't go back to the guest room. I went straight to David's office. He calls it his sanctuary, which is just his way of saying stay out. It smelled like leather and old paper. Everything was too organized. I sat at his desk and looked at the computer. He's always been careful with passwords, but he has this little moleskine notebook where he writes everything down. I started digging through his desk drawers. I was looking for his tax returns from the last few years, but it was a nightmare. He keeps a separate folder for every single utility bill since 2012. I found a stack of old receipts for a toaster that broke 5 years ago. Why on earth does he still have a receipt for a $20 toaster from a Kmart that doesn't even exist anymore? It's a piece of thermal paper that's practically faded to white, just useless clutter taking up space. It was so pointless it actually made me mad. Anyway, I shoved the receipts aside and found the notebook. The password for his laptop was just a mix of our wedding date and the house number. He wasn't even that clever, he just figured I'd never look. Once I was in, I skipped the emails and texts. I went straight to the banking. We have a joint account for the mortgage and stuff, but David has his own business account. He told me it was for corporate reimbursements and was too complicated for me to track. I opened the statements and started scrolling. My chest just felt heavy. There were these transfers. Small ones at first, 200, 500 to an account I didn't recognize. Then they got bigger. 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. He wasn't just cheating, he was taking money from our future. I checked our 401k and saw the contributions had dropped. He'd changed the percentages without telling me and moved the money into that other account. I just sat there in the silence with the axi humming, and I realized the man I'd spent 20 years supporting was a stranger. I was the one doing the house, the soccer practices, making sure we had the right almond milk in the fridge, and he was building a secret life with our own money. I thought about the beige walls in the living room. I helped him pick that sandstone color. I spent so much time making sure the curtains matched the trim. I'd spent my whole adult life trying to be the perfect quiet partner. I guess I made myself so quiet, he thought I'd stopped listening. I started downloading everything. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every hotel booking in cities he had no reason to visit. I put them on a thumb drive and hid it in the attic, inside an old box of Maya's kindergarten art. As I was leaving the office, I heard the garage door. He was home early. I went into the kitchen and started dinner. I chopped carrots, just listening to the knife hit the board. I didn't look at him when he walked in. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes," I said. "Not really hungry," he said, tossing his keys on the counter. "I think we need to talk about you, seeing a therapist. Emma, I'm really worried about your mental state." I looked at him. I didn't really feel love or hate. He just felt like a problem. Like a smudge on the counter I needed to wipe away. "I'll think about it," I said. I went back to the carrots. I didn't say anything else for the rest of the night. We sat at the table, just the sound of forks hitting the plates. He tried to talk about the hoa and some rule about the hedges, but I just nodded and kept eating. I wasn't sad anymore. I just felt cold. I wondered how much more was in that other account. I wondered who the woman was. But mostly, I wondered how long it would take to move all our joint savings into an account he couldn't touch. When he went to bed, saying his headache was back, I stayed in the kitchen. I washed the dishes one by one and dried them. I put the plates back in the cupboard, making sure they were lined up perfectly. I just put the dishes away. The heat in Phoenix is just, it's everywhere. Even with the ack cranking, the walls of the house feel warm, like the stucco is just breathing out all the sun it soaked up. Monday morning was a mess. I spent half the day at school dealing with a leaking ceiling tile in the back of my classroom. Gary, the custodian, is a nice guy, but his useless told me it'd be fixed by Tuesday. He said that about 3 other things this month. So I just put a plastic bucket under the drip and tried to teach a group of 7-year-olds about long vowels while it just went plink, plink, plink in the background. I found myself staring at that bucket for a long time. I wasn't even thinking about the leak. I was thinking about that thumb drive I'd tucked inside a box of Maya's old finger paintings in the attic. I wondered if David had noticed it was gone, or if he even knew I'd opened the briefcase. He'd been acting strange, more attentive, but in a way that felt, I don't know, rehearsed. Like he was reading a script on how to handle a wife who is spiraling. He started bringing me flowers on Wednesdays. Just grocery store carnations in that cheap clear plastic. He'd set them on the kitchen counter and give me this small, tight smile. It felt like he was rewarding a pet for staying quiet. I think it was a Tuesday. Or maybe Wednesday. I can't really remember because Maya had a late soccer game, and I spent an hour fighting with my GPS because of some construction on the Loop 101. I remember sitting in traffic, watching the heat waves shimmer off all these silver cars, and I just felt this weird, detached curiosity. I wanted to know exactly how much of my life was a lie. Not like a movie, just the slow, grinding kind of lying that happens in the margins. When I got home, David was already in his office. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went straight to the guest room, locked the door, and pulled out my own laptop. I plugged in the drive. I started with the bank statements. I'd already seen the transfers, but I wanted to see the patterns. He hadn't just been moving money, he had a whole second life. Payments to a property management company in Scottsdale. A luxury condo. I scrolled through the entries until my eyes blurred. The rent was more than our mortgage. He was paying for a place where he could be whoever he wanted to be. Then I found the emails. He'd used a separate Gmail account, but he was stupid enough to leave the password in that Moleskine notebook. I logged in and it felt like a slow leak in my stomach. Her name was Alina, 32, freelance interior designer. I found photos of her in the sent folder. She had this way of looking at the camera confident, leaning back. In the emails, David didn't sound like the man who complains about the HOA's rules on hedge height. He sounded hungry. He told her she was the only thing that made him feel alive. He said his life at home was a necessary structure, a place of stability, so he could pursue the real passion he had with her. I read one from 6 months ago. He wrote, "Emma is the anchor, Elena. She keeps everything grounded, everything in its place. But you're the wind. I can't breathe without you." I just sat there staring at the screen. He'd turned my devotion into a utility. All the school forms, the carpools, the organic almond milk, the neutral curtains. That wasn't love to him. It was just structure. I was the plumbing and the wiring he took for granted, so he could go have an adventure in a Scottsdale condo. I looked through the photos he'd sent her. Dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, bottles of wine that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and a gold necklace he'd bought her. I recognized the jewelry store. It's in the mall where I take Maya for shoes. He'd walked right past the stores I liked and went into the high-end boutique to buy something that probably cost 3 months of my teaching salary. I had this sudden urge to throw something. I looked around the guest room, the beige walls, the heavy dresser, the smell of stale linen. I didn't throw anything. I just closed the laptop and leaned my head against the wall. The wall was warm. I decided I needed the address of the condo. I spent the next hour digging through his digital calendar and the property payments. I found it. A high-rise with a gym and a rooftop pool. The kind of place where people wear white linen and talk about their portfolios. While I was searching, I noticed a folder on his desktop labeled Taxes 22192021. I opened it, thinking maybe more money stuff, but it was just a bunch of old PDFs. Insurance quotes, some medical records for his father, and scanned coupons for a local car wash that went out of business years ago. Why on earth was he keeping scanned images of expired car wash coupons from 2019? It was so pointless. I spent 5 minutes just staring at a buy four, get one free voucher, feeling actually irritated. This man can orchestrate a double life for years, but he keeps digital archives of useless coupons. It was just a weird, cluttered contradiction. Anyway, I deleted the folder. I don't know why, but it felt like the only thing I had control over. That night, dinner was chicken and steamed broccoli. David talked about a new zoning law in Tempe and how it would affect his project. He asked if I wanted to go to the movies this weekend. "What movie?" I asked. "I don't know, maybe that new thriller or a comedy. Whatever you're in the mood for," he said. I looked at him, really looked at him. I noticed a small crease in his polo shirt near the collar. I noticed the way he chewed his food, slow and methodical. I wondered if he'd tasted the lie in his mouth or if he'd just gotten used to it. "I'm not really in the mood for a movie," I said. "Tired from school?" he asked. He had that fake concern in his voice. "You really should take a few personal days, Emma. You look exhausted." I didn't answer. I just kept eating my broccoli. I wondered if Alina liked broccoli. I wondered if she knew about the 401k. I wondered if he told her I was spiraling, or if he just didn't mention me at all. I think it was a Friday when I finally made the call. I didn't call a friend or my sister. I called a divorce attorney I'd seen an ad for in the paper. His office was in one of those generic plazas, with a faded awning and a parking lot that was cracking from the heat. The place smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. The attorney, Marcus, wore a suit that looked a size too large for him. He listened as I laid out everything. I gave him the thumb drive. I told him about the condo and the money. "You're in a strong position," Marcus said, leaning back. "The financial misappropriation, moving money from a joint retirement account into a private one, that's going to look very bad for him, especially in Arizona. We can push for a significant portion of the assets. I don't just want the money," I whispered. Marcus looked at me with this tired expression, like a man who spends 40 hours a week listening to people's lives fall apart. Usually, people say that. But the money is the only thing the court can actually force him to give you. The rest, the apologies, the closure, that doesn't come with a court order. I left his office feeling hollow. I drove home slowly, stopping at a red light and watching some teenagers laughing in a beat-up Honda. They looked so young and uncomplicated. I remember thinking that I wanted to be that loud. I wanted to drive through the neighborhood and just scream at the top of my lungs to see if anyone would notice. When I got home, the house was quiet. Maya was at a friend's, and David was still at work. I went into the kitchen and started cleaning. I scrubbed the granite counters, wiped the baseboards, and reorganized the pantry. I spent an hour just aligning the soup cans so the labels faced forward. It was mindless, and it was the only thing that stopped my hands from shaking. I found a smudge of grease on the oven door and spent 10 minutes trying to get it off with a sponge and baking soda. It wouldn't budge. I just kept scrubbing harder and harder until my arm ached. I didn't get the smudge off. I just gave up and left it there. Around 6 p.m., David walked in. He had a bag of takeout from a Thai place we both liked. I thought we'd treat ourselves tonight, he said, setting the bag on the counter. Had a great day at the office. Closed the deal on the temp project. He looked so happy, like he had everything under control. I looked at the grease smudge on the oven, and then I looked at him. I felt the strange cold clarity. The heartbreak was still there, but it had shifted. It wasn't a sharp pain anymore, it was more like a dull ache. Like a bruise you keep pressing just to make sure it's still there. I saw the condo, David, I said. He didn't even flinch. He just stopped unpacking the food. He turned to me, and the therapist voice was gone. His face went flat. How? He asked. Not as spiraling as you thought, I replied. I found the password, I found the emails, I found the bank transfers. He sighed, but it wasn't a sad sigh. It was annoyance, like Id just told him the dishwasher was broken again. He leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. Well, he said, his voice cold. I suppose the cat is out of the bag. I was going to tell you eventually, Emma, but I wanted to wait until the timing was right, until we had a plan. A plan? I asked. What plan? The one where you spend our retirement on a woman half your age in a high-rise. Alina isn't just some fling, he said. He actually sounded defensive. She understands me in a way you never could. You're a wonderful woman, Emma. You're a great mother, but you're predictable. You're the beige walls of this house. You're the routine. I needed something else. I needed to feel something other than just stability. I didn't cry. I wasn't even angry. I was just exhausted. He had spent 20 years praising my stability, and now he was using it against me. He wanted the safety of the home I built, but he wanted the excitement of someone else. He assumed I was too predictable to ever find out. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said. That actually caught him off guard. He straightened up, eyes narrowing. A lawyer? Emma, don't be dramatic. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll end it with her. Still sell the condo. I don't want you to end it, I said. I want you to leave, he laughed. A short, sharp sound. Leave? Where would I go? This is my house. I paid for the majority of this house. We'll see what Marcus thinks about that, I said. I walked away from him and went into the living room. I sat on the cream-colored sofa and looked at the sandstone walls. I realized I didn't hate the color anymore. I just hated that I'd spent so much time making sure everything matched. David followed me in, trying to negotiate, trying to pivot back to that soft, manipulative tone. He talked about Maya. He talked about the years we've invested. He talked about our reputation in the neighborhood. I didn't listen. I just watched the ceiling fan spin, counting the clicks. Eventually, he gave up and went into his office and slammed the door. The house quiet again, except for a neighbor's lawnmower and the hum of the AC. I stayed on the sofa for a long time, just breathing. I wondered what happened to the woman in the red swimsuit. I wondered if she knew that her wind was actually just a man who kept scanned coupons for a dead car wash and lied about his 401k. I wondered if she liked the beige walls, or if she was the one who convinced him they were boring. I got up and went back to the kitchen. I looked at the Thai food, still sitting in the bag on the counter. I wasn't hungry. I took the bag, walked to the trash can, and threw the whole thing away. I didn't even open the containers. I just put the bag in the bin and pushed it down with my foot. I spent the rest of the night in the guest room. I didn't lock the door this time. I just lay on the bed and looked at the mahogany dresser. It really was too big for the room. It made everything feel cramped. I decided that when the house was sold, I would never buy a piece of furniture that didn't fit the space. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but the heat was still there, pulsing in the walls. I just lay there. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow. I just knew that for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't worried about the organic almond milk. The AC in our bedroom started doing this annoying whistling thing, like a tea kettle that wouldn't actually boil. It was enough to keep me awake for hours, just lying there in the dark, listening to David breathe next to me. We were still sharing a bed, mostly because I didn't want him to know what I was actually doing. If I'd moved to the guest room, he'd know something was up. My lawyer Marcus told me that keeping him in the dark was the most important part. Let him think you're just depressed, Marcus had said. Let him think you've just shut down. Guys like David love feeling like they've already won. So I just went along with it. I stopped arguing. I stopped asking where he was going or who he was texting. I'd just give him a small smile and ask if he wanted low-fat or whole milk for his coffee. I kept the house spotless. I ironed his shirts like really focused on the creases. It was just a performance. Every day from the moment I woke up until I pretended to fall asleep, Phoenix in late September is just brutal. That dry, baking heat, where the asphalt shimmers and the houses look bleached white. I think it was a Monday. Wait, no, it had to be Tuesday. I had a staff meeting at school. Anyway, the commute was a nightmare. Some accident on the I-10 had traffic backed up for miles. I just sat there in my Honda with the AC on max, staring at a billboard for a personal injury lawyer. I wondered if Marcus' office was as depressing as the one in the ad. My car was also making this weird rattling sound in the dashboard, this tiny metallic clicking that happened every time I hit 40. It was driving me insane, but I couldn't even deal with it. I spent a lot of time in my car those weeks. It was the only place I could actually be alone. I'd park in the far corner of the Target parking lot after work and just sit there, looking at the shopping carts. I was doing the math. 20 years. 7,000. No, 7,300 days of folding towels and paying bills. I thought about the graduate program in San Diego. I never did. And how I used to wear bright colors. Now I just wore navy and gray. I just blended in. Marcus wanted a list of everything David owned. He said marital waste money David spent on the condo and the jewelry could be clawed back. So, while David was working late or at the gym, I spent my nights digging through digital archives. I found a folder in his cloud storage that he'd forgotten to password protect. It wasn't more photos of Alina, it was a spreadsheet. He'd tracked his spending on her the same way he does his work projects. He had a column for maintenance, which I guess was her rent and experiences. He spent $12,000 on one weekend in Napa Valley last year. I remember that weekend. He told me he was at a leadership conference in Chicago and the signal was bad. I spent the whole time worrying if he was getting enough sleep and making sure Maya's soccer uniforms were clean. I felt this cold vibration in my chest reading those numbers. I wasn't even heartbroken anymore. It was just logistics. Every dollar he spent on her was a dollar he stole from my future and Maya's college fund. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a creditor. One afternoon, I went into the hallway closet to find the house deed and some insurance papers. The closet was basically a graveyard for things we couldn't throw away. I was digging through some folders and found a box of David's old college textbooks. Under them was a bag of mismatched charging Cabelsus BC, Microsp, and those old Apple ones from a decade ago. I don't know why he kept them. As I tried to pull the folders out, the bag got caught on a coat hook. I spent 10 minutes just untangling a cord for a phone that probably doesn't even exist anymore. It was a frayed white cable sticky for some reason, and I stood there for a minute, pulling at a knot that wouldn't budge. I got actually genuinely angry at those cables. It was stupid, but it just felt annoying. Anyway, I shoved them back in and found the deed. I took the papers to Marcus on a Thursday. He looked tired, tie loosened, a half-eaten sandwich on his desk. He scanned them and nodded. He's been bolder than I thought, Marcus said. The way has moving this money. It's not just an affair, Emma, it's basically fraud. If we do this right, we can make it very uncomfortable for him to fight you. I don't want to fight, I told him. I just want him gone. The best way to get him gone is to make the cost of staying too high. he replied. I left and stopped at a drive-through for a vanilla shake. I drank it slowly and drove through the suburbs, looking at all the other stucco houses. I wondered how many other women were driving around with thumb drives in their purses, just waiting. When I got home, David was in the kitchen with a glass of wine. He gave me that look, the one where he's checking my mood to see if he needs to use his concerned voice. How was your day, honey? It was fine. I kissed his cheek. He felt like a stranger. Did you see the HOA notice about the drought restrictions? I'll get to it, he said, waving his hand. Brutal day. The Tempe project is hitting some snags with the city council. I'm sorry to hear that. I actually sounded sorry. It was the easiest lie I've ever told. The next few days, I worked with a financial advisor, Marcus recommended. We set up a separate account in my name. I started moving small amounts of money into it. Nothing that would trigger a red flag, but enough for a safety net. I felt like a spy. I'd monitor the joint account and wait for his bonuses to hit so I could skim a bit before he moved it to his secret account. David got complacent. Because I wasn't fighting, he started treating me like a piece of furniture again. He'd talk over me at dinner or forget to tell me about weekend plans. He thought I'd just accepted things. He thought he'd convinced me that my suspicions were just burnout. It was almost funny. He thought I was submitting, but I was just retreating. Maya started noticing, though. She's 14, so she has a radar for this stuff. One night, while we were folding laundry, she looked at me. Why are you acting so nice? I stopped folding a towel. What do you mean? You're like super nice. You don't even complain when Dad leaves his gym bag in the hallway. It's weird. I wanted to tell her everything right then. That her father was a thief and we were escaping. But Marcus warned me not to involve the kids until the papers were served. He said it could be used against me. I'm just trying to be more mindful, Maya, I said. Stress is bad for the heart. You're acting like a robot, she muttered, then went back to her phone. I felt bad, but I had to be precise. I started documenting everything in a hidden app on my phone. Every lie, every time he was cold. Marcus said a journal is subjective and not great for court, but it was for me. I needed a record so I wouldn't start doubting myself again. It was exhausting. Living with someone you despise while pretending to love them is like wearing a costume. That's 2 sizes too small. I started staying late at school, grading papers, or volunteering for committees I didn't care about. I just couldn't be in the house with him. I remember one afternoon in the teacher's lounge, trying to heat up some leftover pasta. The microwave there is ancient, it heats the bowl to 1,000 degrees, but the food stays cold in the middle. I stood there watching the plate spin, noticing a crusty spot of old tomato sauce on the rotating glass tray that someone had been too lazy to wipe up. I just started laughing. Not a happy laugh, just a sharp sound. Mrs. Gable, the history teacher who always smells like peppermint, looked at me. You okay, Emma? I'm great, I said, wiping my eye. Just the microwave. It's just so inefficient. I ate my cold pasta at my desk. I realized I was becoming a stranger to myself, too. I could lie with a smile and plan a financial exit strategy while talking about the new curriculum. I wondered if that's how David had felt all those years. Toward the end of the month, David decided to take me on a surprise trip to Sedona to reconnect. I know things have been tense, he said, holding my hands. His palms were sweaty. I want us to get back to where we were. I love you and I love this family. I felt a flicker of disgust. The audacity was almost impressive. He wanted a spa weekend to smooth things over so he could keep his double life. I'd love to, I said. Marcus wasn't happy. He thought it was a vulnerable position, but I told him David didn't suspect a thing. I wanted to see how he acted when he thought he'd manipulated me. The trip was a chore. Sedona is beautiful, but every dinner and every intimate moment felt like work. David was in a great mood. He talked about renovating the kitchen and taking a long vacation when Maya graduated. I feel like we're finally turning a corner, he said on the balcony, watching the sunset. I feel like you're finally seeing that I'm on your side. I am, I said. I sipped my wine. I really am. I spent the weekend taking photos. Not of the red rocks, but of the receipts. Whenever he left the room to take a call, I slipped into his bag. I found a receipt for a jewelry store in Scottsdale diamond earrings for Elena. It felt satisfying. Each receipt was just another piece of evidence. When we got back to Phoenix, I felt a weird sense of closure. I'd seen him in his full delusional glory. He really thought he could have the wife, the daughter, and the mistress, and the only cost was a few trips to Sedona. I met Marcus one last time. We had everything. Bank transfers, emails, the condo photos, the 401k stuff. We're ready, Marcus said. Once we serve him hell panic, we've already filed the injunction to freeze the joint accounts. Do it, I said. I went home and got things ready for Maya. I didn't want her blindsided. I spent the afternoon cleaning her room and organizing her desk for her soccer tournament. That evening, David came home humming a song. He hugged me from behind in the kitchen. I'm thinking about that kitchen remodel, he said. Maybe white quartz instead of granite. What do you think? I didn't pull away. I just thought about the documents in my purse in the other room. I think a change is long overdue, I said. He laughed and kissed my neck. You've been in such a great mood lately, I'm glad we went to Sedona. Me too, I said. After he went upstairs to change, I put the envelope on the coffee table, right on top of a home decor magazine. I didn't stay to watch him open it. I didn't want to see the shock or the therapist voice he'd inevitably use. I went into the kitchen and started a load of laundry. I sorted the whites from the colors and filled the bleach. I heard the envelope open, then a long gap where nothing happened. I didn't stop. I started the washer. The machine began to thrum, filling the house with that steady vibration. I stood there for a minute watching the water fill the drum. David came into the kitchen. He wasn't shouting. He just looked hollow. He was holding the papers, his knuckles white. Emma, he said. His voice was shaking. What is this? I turned around. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't try to soften my face or make him comfortable. It's over, David, he tried to speak, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said. Don't do the voice. Don't tell me I'm spiraling or that you were protecting the family. Just go back to the living room. I'm doing the laundry. I turned back to the machine. I saw a small piece of lint on the floor, bent down and put it in the trash. Then I waited for the timer to go off.